I thank all members for their comments, and it is now time for petitions. And I do have the member from Timmins, James Bay, who wants to stand on a point of privilege.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll not try to take too much time, but I just want to say in the outset of this particular point of privilege, as House Leader for the New Democratic Party and as New Democrats, it's not something we normally do. We normally try to work with those here so that we can find collegial ways to be able to move forward with whatever it is that we're doing in this House. But I find myself in a bit of an odd spot because what happened here yesterday, I think, is not only wrong in its very nature, I think it affects the ability of members to be able to do their jobs here in Parliament to a degree. Yesterday, a member rose in his House, and Mr. Prince Edward Hastings, a member from Prince Edward Hastings, rose in his House and introduced a very good bill. The bill was an act to proclaim the January as Tamil Heritage Month, something that we support as New Democrats, and in fact, something our party president actually worked on for some time and is an active member of the Tamil community. So I had made it clear that we would be supporting this unanimous consent. I know that I talked to my colleague from the Liberal side of the House Leader, and I had mentioned it to some of the Conservatives that were sitting in my area. So the member got up, and rightfully so, introduced a bill, did as all members have to do, and then asked for unanimous consent, which is his right. When unanimous consent was asked, we did not say no. We allowed the unanimous consent to go forward. Somebody in this House, in case on the government side, said no for their own reasons, which they can explain. And my point of privilege is not so much what happened as far as the outcome of the unanimous consent as far as the vote, but it's what happened after. The member for Prince Edward Hastings a letter to the Tamil communities, which he says, "It is great regret that I follow up today about my earlier email that I sent regarding the passage of an act to proclaim January Tamil Heritage Month. Today, when I attempted to ask for unanimous consent to have the bill passed, all three readings quickly, members of the NDP and Liberals refused to support the motion," which is not true. We never refused consent on this bill. In fact, we were in favour.
On a point of order. On the same point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if I could just make a brief presentation on behalf of my party on the presentation that's just been made by the NDP House Leader. I want to say that we have some sympathy with the points that he brought forward. What's happening here, Mr. Speaker, is we're trying to find a balance here in the legislature between the right of any member to ask for unanimous consent to, in this case, and there have been other cases, to have a private member's bill passed at all three readings. So the balance between that and the fact that the standing orders and the way and traditions and functions of this House do not have a clear path for private members' bills to proceed to third reading and a vote. And the tradition of this House, and ever since I've been here, has been for House leaders to sit down and to discuss the various private members' bills that have been put forward by members of their caucus, and to engage in discussion and agreement to bring them forward. Usually these discussions are about fairness. There's usually an issue of equity. I remember when I was first elected here, and we'd all wait for the House Leader to come in and say, okay, 2 of our Liberal private members' bills are going forward, 2 from the other parties, 2 from such and such. We've all sat down and figured out ones that we could agree on. Mr. Speaker, you would know this. Every member knows this. It's difficult to explain to stakeholders the process by which private members' bills pass. And the number who come to see me as House leaders, I have constituents who come to see me, and they just, they're constantly raising concerns and why is it not going forward. It is difficult to explain, like so many things around here. So as a result, Mr. Speaker, what happened yesterday is not very helpful, because the honourable member, as his right, asked for unanimous consent on a bill which I support and which I suspect every member of this legislature supports. But because he was not following the traditions, because it had not been something that had been discussed amongst House leaders and agreement reached, I shouted no. And Mr. Speaker, I will say that. I was the one who shouted no.
The government house, the opposition House Leader.
Not quite the government House Leader yet, Mr. Speaker. Listen, I'm living in la-la land at the moment, I guess, because the government House Leader has just given us a semi-lecture on how things are normally done in this House. I don't know. I think I've been House Leader a couple of years, and I don't recall any of this nonsense that he's talking about. If that was the way this was done, you guys had lots of opportunity, months and months, when this bill was in the same form, but under another member's name. Mr. Couteau is now the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, and you could have passed the bill. I brought it up at House Leaders on a few occasions, and we couldn't get any agreement. So we wait for you guys to come up with your fairy tales about how things are supposed to be done in this House. The Tamils would never have January proclaimed as Tamil Heritage Month, and that's what is that issue here. I think we have guilty conscience. We got caught. There have been hundreds of bills in my 24 years done 3 readings in one day. I remember doing one as Labour critic when everybody agreed on presumptive legislation for firefighters and workers' compensation. There was no disagreement that day. I've done up to 7 of them myself. This is an issue that was not controversial until you guys got a guilty conscience overnight because you were asleep at the switch. Now, what the next time it comes up, because this is what matters here, is the fact that if the member for Prince Edward Hastings asks you again for 2nd and 3rd reading and unanimous consent for that, will you consent to that? That's the right thing to do on behalf of the Tamil community, and that's what we're going to do in this Congress.
I'll defer just before I come. The member before I come to you. A member that has not spoken is stood wants to make a point of order. The member from Prince Edward Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it was my honest belief, and it still is my honest belief, that when I asked for unanimous consent for the Tamil Heritage Bill yesterday, that I heard no's from both corners of the House. It was clear that I heard a no from across the aisle, and I honestly thought that I heard a no.
Absolutely.
Order, please.
Is that right?
Order, please. To the chair, please.
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to move a motion without notice regarding Bill 156.
I would remind the member that I have to rule on the point of privilege, so you have to hold that. Do you have anything further to say to wrap up?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, all I can say is that it was my honest belief that I heard no's from both corners of the House. I stand by that, and I will stand by that forever.
Thank you. And to wrap up, the member from Timmins, the third-party House Leader.
Thank you very much. Just very quickly, I want again for the record to say that we actually did not oppose unanimous consent yesterday. In fact, we had communicated that we'd be voting in favour, and I think the submission from the Conservative caucus speaks for itself.
First, let me say very clearly that the point of privilege was submitted appropriately and was dealt with at this time for that reason. And I also thank all members for their submissions, and I will reserve my ruling. I'll reserve my ruling on that issue, and will return back to the House with my ruling. It is now time for petitions.